The world is grappling with COVID-19 pandemic, which has brought the entire world to a standstill. This public health crisis threatens each of 7.8 billion people on this earth. The health officials and medical professionals are waging an all-out struggle against COVID-19. In such a context, in this video, we'll try to understand the impact of COVID-19 on the existing world order and how would it be reshaped. Without a doubt, this pandemic has exposed the fault lines in the existing global order. What we are witnessing is the unraveling of global governance structure which was created in the aftermath of the Second World War. The credibility of WHO as a global health institution has taken a beating. Traditionally, we don't look at WHO through the lens of big power confrontation, but of late you can see there is a war of words going on between Americans and Chinese over which of them is responsible for the crisis. WHO is also accused of toeing the Chinese line. Not just WHO, even the legitimacy of other international institutions like United Nations, WTO, UNHCR also stand questioning. The response of United Nations to this pandemic was too late and too little. World Health Organization have declared the outbreak of coronavirus as a global pandemic on 11th of March. But only on 23rd March, United Nations Secretary General called for an immediate global ceasefire in all corners of the world. And few days after that, United Nations launched its COVID-19 Global Humanitarian Response Plan. In fact, UN also took so long to meet in order to discuss about this pandemic. In fact, April 9th, UNSC meeting was a result of constant pressure from the majority of the non-permanent members of the UNSC. The refugees are particularly vulnerable to these kinds of pandemic. UNHCR should have taken a proactive role in safeguarding the refugees against the COVID-19. Today, approximately 20 million refugees are there under the mandate of UNHCR. WTO has failed to mitigate the global supply chain disruption. The countries like Germany, Brazil, Canada and Spain are accusing US of outbidding them, particularly for the medical supplies. Germany have even accused USA of modern piracy. This pandemic has shown that the institutions of 1950s and 60s are less likely to be effective against the 21st century threat perceptions. Once the pandemic is over, the debate about globalization can be expected to take a center stage. The famous slogans like borderless world, world as a global village, think globally, act locally kind of things may not have the same kind of a currency that it used to enjoy in the past. Countries have already started taking measures to protect their people and their territory. Borders were closed, imports were banned. Analysts believe that we will only see a further retreat from this hyper-globalization. COVID-19 have proven that pathogens will not only infect people but can also poison the entire global supply chain. Given the vulnerabilities to such disruptions, nations would like to keep their supply chain mechanism closer to home. They would move towards a selective self-sufficiency, if not complete self-sufficiency. More stringent imposition of non-tariff trade barriers like sanitary and photosanitary certificates can be expected. So, the mutually beneficial globalization can be a thing of the past. In short, many analysts believe that this COVID-19 would create a world that is less open. Former diplomat and Singaporean academic Kishore Mahbubani is of the view that this pandemic will not fundamentally alter the global economic direction. Rather, it would only further accelerate a change which has already begun, a move away from US-centric globalization to a more of a Chinese-centric globalization. He argues that the West have lost faith in globalization and international trade. The US President Donald Trump is of the view that free trade agreements are toxic. Donald Trump called North Atlantic Free Trade Agreement as a worst trade deal ever. Under Trump's administration, US has also withdrawn from Trans-Pacific Partnership. The trade war with China, America First policy, Make in America campaign only further vindicates the shift. In Europe, people associate terror attacks and migration crisis as an offshoot of globalization. There is a growth of nationalistic and xenophobic sentiments in Europe. The rise of far-right party in Germany, the AfD, can be seen as an example of such sentiments. When the West is showing some withdrawal symptoms, China on the other hand is championing the cause of globalization. China is working very hard through Asia's Infrastructure Investment Bank, the New Development Bank, the Belt and Road Initiative to create an alternative structure. Chinese people are far more culturally confident today. They believe that they can compete with anyone in any part of the world. The pandemic would definitely strengthen the state and reinforce nationalism. The American linguist Noam Chomsky have criticized neoliberal globalization in his book Profit Over People for its neglect of public health and education. Today, all those countries which have followed the neoliberal private healthcare system has been found wanting. The minimum state theory has failed to deliver the goods. The private capital could not serve the public interest. As people look up to national government for their safety, protection and security, the state would recapture its lost ground. Professor Happy Moon Jacob have predicted in his article that the state-led model of globalization may replace the neoliberal corporate-led model of globalization. The state, which is losing to the economic forces, will return as a last refugee of the people. This pandemic could legitimize the border walls, the regional organizations like European Union, if it could not provide more targeted assistance to 500 million of its citizens, then national governments may like to take back more power from Brussels in future. This may further affect the European integration and other kind of regional cooperation. The Professor John Eakenberry is of the view that the immediate response to the pandemic might be more nationalistic at first, but in a long run, democracies in general and Western democracies in particular will come out of their shell and find a new type of pragmatic and protective internationalism. Many analysts believe this COVID-19 will also accelerate a shift of power and influence from west to east. United States will no longer be seen as an international leader. For one, its incompetency. For two, its overtly inward-looking, narrow self-interest, and so on. Parag Khan, the author of the book The Future is Asian, is of the view that the countries that have managed this pandemic most successfully are the Asian democracies like South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and so on. India has made an effort to create a regional collective security arrangement by initiating a SAARC virtual conference on this pandemic. India is showing an intent to lead the region during the time of crisis. Despite its limited capacity and bandwidth, India has been so generous by offering medical assistance to the countries which are in need on a humanitarian ground. When the West is becoming so inward-looking, China is making a strong case for itself as a global leader. After its initial mistakes and failures, China has bounced back well. It has moved on from being a victim to the fighter, and now it is projecting itself as the savior of the world. China's masked diplomacy is successful. It is running from pillar to post to win the hearts and minds of the global audience. According to Happy Moon Jacob, he believes China is using its manufacturing power to its geopolitical advantage. China have offered medical expertism and assistance to those countries in need. It started cooperating with its arch rival like Japan. China's richest man, Jack Ma, is actually spearheading the private sector's fight against this COVID-19. All these actions of China is a smart economic investment for a future geopolitical gain. It may be a last nail in the coffin. COVID-19 cannot be isolatedly associated with the decline of US hegemony. The The decline of US hegemony goes back to its failed wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, delegitimization of American capitalist model because of a 2008 financial crisis, emergence of regional organizations, or other reasons for the decline of US hegemony. We can believe that COVID-19 is accelerating the process which have begun 2 decades ago. What will not change fundamentally is the conflictive nature of the world politics. Stephen M. Walt pessimistically recalls that the previous pandemics like plague of 1918 have not resulted in end of world conflict, nor did it usher in any kind of global cooperation. Similarly, it can be expected that this COVID-19 will also not fundamentally alter the global conflicts. In fact, the relationship between US and China is expected to further deteriorate after the pandemic. When the nature is angry over the entire world, the wars are still going on, whether in Syria, Palestine, Iran, Iraq, and so on. Even during the time of humanitarian crisis, the sanctions on most of the countries were not lifted. Sometimes we need a crisis to galvanize public opinion. As Winston Churchill says, we should not let a good crisis go waste. We have to learn from this crisis and have to reprioritize our agenda. Climate change, global warming, ozone layer depletion, cyber security threats can cause same kind of havoc that this pandemic have caused. These non-traditional security threats are generally non-military in nature but transitional in scope. These are neither totally domestic nor purely intrastate, but are transmitted rapidly due to globalization and communication revolution. These are the kinds of threats that even superpowers cannot deal on its own. We need a collective security arrangement to eliminate these threats. Let's hope that we'll learn a lesson and enlightened global interest provides.